Tonight, Clutha remembered. 10 years on from the police helicopter crash into a busy Glasgow pub, relatives, friends and survivors talk about the lasting impact.
I'm just up, I'm just out of bed. Said there's a helicopter has crashed into the Clutha. I said, oh my God, and she said, Mark's on there. And I just paused a bit, I just dropped the phone. I knew he wasn't coming out.
Also making the headlines, looking for justice. Clients of the failed legal firm McClure solicitors say their trusts were mismanaged and there could be up to 90,000 others in the same position.
Some have died, and it's their descendants that are trying to sort out the mess.
Aiming high. Why the council wants to see more tall buildings on Glasgow's skyline.
And after exiting Europe, a visit to the Vatican, where Celtic met the Pope and gave him a signed jersey. I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. 10 years ago, a popular pub in Glasgow was packed with people enjoying a night out and listening to a local band. It could have been any Friday night in the city before or since. But on this night, a helicopter flying overhead was in trouble and crashed through the roof of the pub. A random, deadly chance. The Clutha tragedy has been described as a dark day for Glasgow and for Scotland. A decade on, those who survived have been speaking of the long-lasting emotional impact.
7 customers of the pub, along with all 3 on board the police helicopter, were killed. After laying a wreath in their memory earlier, the Chief Constable said it was a tragedy the force will never forget. In the pub itself, survivors, friends and relatives have gathered throughout the day to reflect on this milestone and remember those lost. Our Chief Reporter Sharon Frew is there for us tonight. Sharon.
It was live music that brought people to the Clutha that Friday night, and this evening the pub is marking this anniversary in the only way it knows how, with a special performance by a choir, its very own choir. In fact, the members are on the stage preparing for the show in little under half an hour's time. Now, this is a small example of the community spirit that has helped people affected by the crash heal over the last 10 years. And many here, including myself, can't quite believe that a decade has passed as the events of that night and what followed afterwards remain so vivid. Some of the survivors told me in the lead up to this anniversary that for some time they couldn't even travel into this part of the city centre. But some are here tonight along with family and friends of those who died. Music and talking, they say, has acted as a form of therapy to help them cope with the horrors of that night.
When the thud happened, someone shouted, oh, one of the speakers has blown. And then when the helicopter came through and everything was just dark and dust everywhere.
Breaking news tonight, and a helicopter has crashed into a bar in Glasgow city centre.
I just remember putting the drinks up onto the wee counter, put my change into the handbag and up I went. I remember getting lifted up.
The door just opened and 2 men came in and they were covered in debris. And he says to me, the Cluthas just blew up. And I opened the doors. It was surreal. It was like something out of a movie set.
A Friday night that changed lives forever. From shared trauma, friendships have been forged. Nancy Primrose had popped into the Clutha for a drink with her sister. Mary Kavanagh was there with her partner Robert Jenkins to listen to the live band.
At one point I remember it was just dark and I've got my hand trying to stop the debris from going into my face and trying to pat round and saying, where am I? Do you know what I mean? And then next thing I knew I was outside. I realised my sister wasn't beside me and I was hysterical, you know, and I just didn't know how badly injured I was at the time, and I got up and apparently I'm running towards the Clutha to try and get in and get her, and Mary stopped me.
She was just amazed at, you know, that it was me who had been standing holding her back. She wanted to get back into Anne. I remember all that, and yet as the time went on, I had false memories of what actually happened when the helicopter came through the roof, and I had nightmares, and I had to have therapy to help with that.
More than 100 people had been in the bar when the police helicopter crashed into the roof. Passers-by helped pull the injured from the debris.
Almost a human chain, trying to pass injured people out, and all you did was grab the person that was given to you and pass them on to the next person.
Knowing that 3 police colleagues had been killed in the crash added to the immense pressure on the emergency services.
For me, it's almost like it happened yesterday. This was certainly one of the most serious incidents I've attended in a career of 40 years. It was a scene of chaos. So very, very difficult circumstances, and also concerns around the safety of staff. Was there aviation fuel or other debris that could injure people inside the pub when they're going in to rescue people?
Mark O'Prea's father was woken up on the Saturday morning by a phone call from his daughter.
He said, there's a helicopter has crashed into the Clutha. I said, oh my God. And she said, Mark's on there. And I just dropped the phone. I knew he wasn't coming out.
Relatives kept a vigil at the crash site during a complex and difficult recovery operation. Mary's partner, Robert Jenkins, was another of the 7 customers who died.
I think it was early in the morning that I think an acceptance came over me that, he wasn't going to get out. But it wasn't until the Sunday afternoon that I was told that they'd found Robert's body.
Survivors say they took great comfort from the outpouring of support from Glasgow and beyond.
I feel the same as everyone else. I'm not quite the same as I was yesterday. Glasgow has really risen to the occasion, though. I've never heard so many nice things about Glasgow. People rushing towards the accident, instead of running away from it.
In 2019, a fatal accident inquiry into the crash concluded that the pilot took a chance and ignored numerous fuel warnings. Captain David Trail's partner described the findings as distressing and incomprehensible.
The FAI did its job admirably well. It really did. We know absolutely nothing about it, but I think that's what FAIs are for, to obscure the truth. We'll never get the truth. We'll never find the truth. As far as I'm concerned, the pilot was not to blame, absolutely not to blame at all.
Survivor's guilt, it's just horrible. Can you describe that to anybody? I find talking about it, talking's therapy.
Every time since I come down, I get a sense of Robert here. I hadn't been in the Clutha before I met Robert. And when he said to me, do you ever go to the Clutha? I says, why did I want to go there? Why would I want to go to the Clutha? And he says, the music's really good. So it's because of Robert that I'm part of the Clutha family, I'm part of the Clutha Trust.
Tonight, the music will play on, pausing for 1 minute at 10:22 to honour those lost and those who will never forget. Sharon Frew, STV News, Glasgow.
Remembering Clutha 10 years on. A group representing clients of a field solicitors firm had a meeting with Police Scotland today, urging the force to look into whether any criminal activity has taken place, particularly in regard to what were called family protection trusts.
McClure's went into administration 2 years ago, and campaigners say up to 90,000 people may be unaware they are affected. Here's our senior reporter, Gordon Cree.
Thomas Lee from Edinburgh died with COVID in a care home in 2020. It then took his family 3 years to untangle his estate.
We didn't really have much of a funeral for him or anything like that. We couldn't have a wake for him, the family couldn't get together, and then we were finding that we were having to Zoom call and phone call and things like that to try and get this resolved, and it just took so long and took so much out of us.
Thomas had put his house into a trust through the law firm McClure Solicitors. He'd paid what was billed as a one-off fee and had been told the arrangement would make things simple for his survivors after his death. But with 2 solicitors from McClure named as trustees on the document, the family were unable to sell the house.
There was an issue with one of the trustees who was refusing to sign the trust. She wanted more money we basically said, we were told there would be no other fees. She was determined that she was going to charge us for signing a piece of paper.
In the end, Helen had to pay the trustee as well as solicitors acting for both sides. McClure had gone into administration in 2021. Its files were passed to another company, Jones White. It has said it has sympathy for the clients of the former firm and is committed to engaging with them in a measured, constructive and sustainable manner. But hundreds of people have joined a Facebook group sharing their stories. Alexander put his home in Aberdeenshire into a trust with McClure, attracted by the claims of simplicity.
My mother had not long died then, and it took forever to get her estate sorted out. And this was they would look after everything. One-shot deal, pay the money, they would look after everything. And when I died, and I thought, oh, that's not bad, that's a good deal, because I will be able to get the children less stress.
After the McClure administration, he was asked for further fees to review the trust and ultimately had to pay to have solicitors' names removed. Tomorrow, members of the group calling itself Victims of McClure's will meet MSPs to call for more regulatory oversight.
There is probably in excess of 90,000 people who are unaware of what's gone on. All of those people are my age and older. I'm 75. There are people in their 80s, 90s, many that are incapacitated. Some have died, and it's their descendants that are trying to sort out the mess.
Collectively, that could cost millions of pounds. Gordon Cree, STV News.
Opposition leaders are stepping up calls for Michael Matheson to be sacked as Health Secretary after a poll suggested he's lost public confidence. Well, our political editor Colin Mackay has been across this. So Colin, what's in this poll?
Well, this Ipsos poll was carried out over the course of the last week. It asks the usual polling questions. It puts yes on independence, it puts yes ahead of no by 54 to 46. On Westminster voting intentions, it puts the SNP on 40, Labour on 30, the Conservatives on 15, the Lib Dems on 6 and the Greens on 3. Now, there's another poll just come out in the last hour by Redfield and Wilton. It puts Labour on 36 and the SNP on 34. But on the back of the Michael Matheson row, Ipsos asked people if they thought that he should resign, and they said that he should by 2 to 1. Now, he has the support of the First Minister, but I put it to him earlier today that he'd lost public confidence.
I'm very clear about the important role I've got as the Health Secretary in making sure that we have an NHS that's recovering from the pandemic.
But the public don't have confidence in you for that, this poll suggests.
Well, the First Minister's very clear about the important role I've got, and I'm determined to make sure...
The public are very clear as well in this poll, 61 to 31. They think you should quit.
Yeah, well, I'm very clear about the important role I've got and the support I've got from the First Minister to make sure that I continue to do everything I can to support the NHS going forward and to make sure that we've got an NHS that's meeting the demands that it's going to face over the course of the next couple of months, which are going to be challenging during the winter period. And the campaign we're launching today is to also encourage the public to play their part in helping to support us during the winter period.
But public confidence matters, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course it does. And I recognise some of the public concern around this issue. And of course, what I did was, as soon as it became aware that the iPad had been used for personal purposes, unbeknown to me, I took immediate action in order to reimburse the Parliament for those full costs. But I've got an important job that I need to get on with, and that is as Health Secretary.
Does this distract from that important job?
No, from my point of view, I've been very clear about getting on with my job as Health Secretary. You can see over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've continued to focus on doing that job, and this campaign that we're launching today is an example of the work we're doing in order to make sure that our NHS is best prepared as we can for the winter months ahead.
Now, that whole thing is now being investigated by the Scottish Parliament's corporate body. They are the cross-party group that runs this place. But opposition leaders today say this poll shows that Mr Matheson's position is untenable.
The public have clearly seen through Michael Matheson's lies and the repeated cover-ups that have been put over this issue, and they'll also be looking at why the First Minister continues to fully support Michael Matheson when he has been proven to have lied. He has clearly claimed money that he shouldn't have done.
We're in the midst of an NHS crisis, and when the Health Secretary should be focusing on that, he's instead trying to hold on to his job. He has misled the public and he didn't tell the truth, and for that he should lose his job.
Now, I don't think anything's going to move on this until we get that corporate body report. Mr Matheson says he hasn't even been asked for written evidence for it yet, but he is on his last chance. If that report comes out against him, if anything else comes out, he could still go.
All right, Colin, thank you very much.
The former Conservative MSP, MP and Scottish Office Minister, Lord James Douglas Hamilton, has died at the age of 81. As a child, he was a royal page at the Queen's coronation in 1953. He was elected to Westminster in 1974 and served as a minister in Margaret Thatcher and John Major's governments. A teacher who suffered physical and verbal abuse from pupils has told STV News that violent incidents in Scotland's classrooms are now an everyday occurrence. Elizabeth Smith says she's had furniture thrown at her and was even stabbed with plastic scissors while teaching.
It comes as the Education Secretary announced a national action plan to tackle the growing issue. Here's our political reporter, Laura Alderman.
When Elizabeth qualified as a teacher 2 years ago, she never imagined she'd be subjected to numerous physical and verbal attacks from her pupils.
I had furniture thrown at me, the learner coming towards me, but at the same time I'd been told if this happened I had to evacuate the rest of the classroom to keep them safe. But it's literally you by yourself in this situation with no training. I did have an incident with a child and plastic scissors that got into my thigh, but luckily I was okay.
She loves teaching, but says the threat of violence has simply become part of the job.
It's obviously something that you worry about, and you do love what you do when you're a teacher. You've got to be passionate about it and committed to it. But then there's this cloud hanging over you thinking, what kind of day is tomorrow going to be?
Elizabeth's experience is not uncommon. A survey from the EIS Teaching Union found the number of pupil on teacher violent incidents has risen significantly in the last 4 years. Incidents are more common in primary schools and are happening on a weekly or often daily basis.
There's verbal abuse, but there's also physical. There's punching and kicking and spitting and biting. And it needs to stop. We need additional teachers, we need additional support staff, we need additional funding to wider support services, educational psychologists, social workers, mental health support, all of which has been slashed over the past few years. We need that to be supplemented.
There are some new and worrying trends emerging too. Teachers say male pupils are more likely to exhibit violent and aggressive behaviour to female staff. And there's been a rise in male pupils expressing misogynistic views.
I expect absolute loyalty from my women.
There's a concern this behaviour is being fuelled by social media influencers like Andrew Tate, who's facing a number of criminal charges relating to allegations of rape and human trafficking.
That's something that we need to look at from a societal point of view. And I think a really important point to make here is that parents do have responsibility for their children and young people. This is not just about responsibility of school staff. So the whole point of having a quality education is that all these sectors need to be working together in equal partnership.
The Education Secretary is under pressure to tackle the issue.
We will develop a national action plan to set out the parameters to improve behaviour and support better relationships in Scotland's schools. The plan will include a range of practical suggestions and solutions.
There's still no new specific guidance for school staff. There's no review of exclusions policies, as many stakeholders have called for.
School staff, pupils and parents will be wondering why the announcement today is for the development of a plan rather than a plan.
Unions say without greater investment in education, the violence will only continue and teachers will be left vulnerable. Laura Alderman, STV News.
To stories in the West, and Glasgow is declaring a housing emergency amid warnings of a homelessness crisis. The City Council says a move by the Home Office to fast-track thousands of asylum claims could prompt a flood of homeless applications. A seventh person has been arrested in connection with wide-scale disorder in an Ayrshire village that saw a police officer hit with a brick. 4 men, 2 women and a 13-year-old boy have now been charged following the disruption in Auchinleck. A reward of up to £20,000 has been offered for information that helps catch a person who stabbed a female police officer in North Ayrshire. She was attacked whilst responding to a break-in in Stevenston last month. Glasgow's skyline could be about to undergo major change, with new guidance being handed out on the type of tall buildings planners want to see being built across the city centre. Ollie Dickinson has more.
Glasgow's skyline is undergoing a significant change, from the new Barclays building in the Tradeston area to hotels and apartments along the Clydeside. They all share one feature: tall buildings that reach for the sky. Now Glasgow City Council have issued guidelines on how new tall buildings should be designed and how they fit in with the city around them.
There'll have to be significant due diligence in terms of assessing the townscape around a building, the impact of any proposed building on its neighbours and on the fabric of the city itself. It's very important that the city is allowed to develop and that we encourage investment into Glasgow, but that we don't affect what makes Glasgow the city that it is.
Tall buildings are by no means a new idea. Georgian architects designed Glasgow to have views that started and ended with huge buildings for their time. And in more recent years, Glasgow's skyline was dominated by high-rise tower blocks.
Glasgow at one point ended up with more buildings over 20 stories than Moscow had. So that was about the turn of the millennium that was the situation in Glasgow. And since then, a lot of those tall buildings have come down, and it does give us a chance to rethink how Glasgow's skyline actually works.
The council say the guidelines will help plan the future of the city centre as they try to entice more people to live within its boundaries.
Retail will still continue to be an important part, but we recognise it may not be as dominant as it maybe once was in the future, so therefore we're looking for residential to increase the vibrancy, the population density of the city centre, so tall buildings could be a key component of that strategy.
With plans to redevelop the St Enoch Centre and the Buchanan Galleries, radical change is coming to the city. It's hoped these guidelines will keep the standard of tall buildings within it rising. Ollie Dickinson, STV News, Glasgow.
Nello sport, la cosa forse più bella.
Perhaps perspective could be found across the Eternal City this morning as Pope Francis held a private audience with the Celtic team. He told them of the importance of the club's charitable history and his hope of preserving sport's amateur spirit in the face of football's ever-growing financial might. Jamie Borthwick, STV News.
Philippe Clement is urging his Rangers players to forget the hurt of their away defeat to Aris Limassol as they get set for the Europa League clash tomorrow night. A win for the Ibrox side would secure their place in the competition into the new year. Since taking over at Ibrox, Philippe Clement has steadied the ship. Unbeaten in the 8 matches he's taken charge of so far, with a cup final on the horizon. But just before the Belgian arrived, the Rangers squad suffered one of the worst results in recent years. A 2-1 defeat to Aris Limassol, sparking outrage among supporters and denting their Europa League hopes. But now, almost 2 months on, Clement is urging his players to forget their nightmare in Cyprus and guarantee progression out the group with a win.
I don't want that they think about that, about the last game, because it always can create some negativity in your head. Or no, I want that they continue what they've been doing until now. In a lot of moments, really good. In Aberdeen, the first 15 minutes, not good. And we had a really good meeting around that. The things that went wrong and the things that went well.
Meanwhile, after Ross McCausland signed a new deal until the summer of 2027, the 20-year-old admits his sights are now firmly set on becoming a first-team regular.
It's plain to say Rangers has been tunnel vision towards Rangers, to be honest, so I plan to stay here for a long time. I think, of course, obviously I want to submit my place in the team every week, and I think obviously with the chances I've had, and obviously the gaffer giving me the chances, and if I just keep doing what I've been doing and taking all the feedback that I've been getting, I think I've a strong chance.
Connor Goldson is suspended for the match at Ibrox tomorrow night, with Scott Wright a doubt through injury. Finally tonight, David Martindale says his outlook on life after spending 4 years in prison can turn round Livingston's fortunes in their relegation battle. Martindale, who was jailed for drug and money laundering offences, says putting the past behind him turned his life around and believes focusing on the future can only benefit his players with the team bottom of the league.
If I was to sit and kind of reminisce on the past and the decisions and the circumstances that I created myself, I don't think I'd be sitting here today. When you first go into prison and you get your sentence, it's not like a television. You can't affect the past, you accept it and you move on. So it's trying to explain that to the players. But I think we've got enough in the building in terms of experience also, good players that all care. They're all frustrated, they're all disappointed, and I think the one thing you could say about any Livingston team, you'll never see the players down in tools.
That is all your sport tonight, folks. As ever, you can keep up to date with all the very latest on the STV Sport website, and we'll be back tomorrow live from Ibrox ahead of Rangers versus Limassol in the Europa League.
All right, thanks very much, Ronnie. OK, let's get the forecast now from Sean.
An icy start to the day will give way to a series of oohs and ahs. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
A very good evening to you. Still hanging on to that cold airflow from Scandinavia for the foreseeable. We'll have a look at the graphs a little bit later on just to show you what's going to happen to the temperatures for the foreseeable. Now tonight, a lot of dry, clear weather. Again, it is going to be a bitterly cold night. I expect probably the likes of East and South Ayrshire, South Lanarkshire, the coldest spots, -5, -6 degrees. So very, very cold. Now, through the next couple of hours, we do have some wintry showers across eastern parts. We could get what we call streamers. That's little showers that just manage to come through the central belt on the airflow. So we could actually get a few wintry showers, perhaps reaching around Glasgow and around North and South Lanarkshire. So possibility of a few wintry showers around here, Falkirk as well, and we would get them. Of course, there will be some icy patches. Now, with temperatures starting off very low tomorrow morning, ice days for quite a few of us, and that's where the temperatures don't get above freezing. So another very cold day, but it will be crisp and sunny again for most of us. And that's the way it's looking for Friday and also Saturday. We'll see a few showers coming into the Hebrides later on Saturday. Here, some rain showers, temperatures for us about 6 degrees Celsius. On Sunday, I expect we'll start to see a bit more cloud coming in, more prolonged spell of rain and sleet and snow falling over higher ground, but staying very cold. Now, across the Hebrides, as you would expect, the islands with the water around us, temperatures are not quite as low, but we are still well below average for the time of year. Slight recovery in our temperatures later on next week and into the second week of December. Much more noticeable, that cold weather, as you come into inland parts of the mainland. Ice days around Glasgow over the next few days, but temperatures recovering into the second week of December, but still well below average. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Oh, we're certainly in for a cold spell. Time to wrap up. Well, that is all from us this evening.
To avoid the cold, you could stay in and watch Ewan Petrie in Scotland tonight at 10:40 tonight. You can do that from all of us. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Good night.